Over the past year, rents in some Canadian cities have jumped by more than 20%, pushing thousands of tenants to the financial edge. But here's the shocking part. Many renters woke up to discover that rental laws had quietly changed, and the rules they thought protected them might not work the same way anymore. From new eviction procedures to rent control exemptions, these changes are already reshaping the housing landscape across the country. Imagine receiving a notice from your landlord tomorrow saying your rent could increase more than expected, or that the building might be sold and your living situation could suddenly change. For many tenants, this isn't a hypothetical scenario. It's happening right now. Governments say these new policies are meant to fix Canada's housing crisis, but critics warn they could also create serious challenges for renters trying to stay in their homes. So what exactly has changed? And more importantly, how could these new rules affect your rent, your rights, and your future housing security? In this video, we're breaking down 10 major rent law changes in Canada that every tenant needs to know, because understanding these rules could make the difference between us staying protected or being caught completely off guard. Number 1. New limits on rent increases. One of the biggest changes affecting tenants right now is the update to rent increase limits across different Canadian provinces. For years, many renters relied on rent control policies to keep their housing costs somewhat predictable. But recently, several provinces have adjusted their guidelines, and in some cases, the rules are not as straightforward as many tenants believe. While governments say these changes are meant to balance housing supply, inflation, and landlord costs, the reality is that many renters are feeling the pressure. In places like Ontario and British Columbia, the government sets a maximum annual rent increase guideline for rent-controlled units. However, here's the catch that many tenants don't realize. Not every rental unit qualifies for rent control anymore. Many newer buildings, especially those constructed after certain cutoff dates, can be exempt from these limits. That means landlords may legally increase rent far beyond the typical guideline once a lease term ends. For tenants who assume their rent would only rise slightly each year, this can come as a shocking surprise. Housing researchers have pointed out that rising inflation, maintenance costs, and housing shortages have pushed governments to rethink how rent control works. But experts also warn that tenants must become more aware of the exact rules that apply to their specific building. The law might protect one apartment, while the unit next door could follow a completely different set of regulations. So what can you do to protect yourself? First, and you always check whether your apartment is covered by rent control laws in your province. Second, landlords are usually required to provide formal written notice before any rent increase, often months in advance. And finally, never hesitate to verify the increase with your local tenant board or housing authority if something feels wrong. Knowing these details might seem small, but understanding them can help you avoid unexpected rent shocks and give you the confidence to stand up for your tenant rights. If you found this information helpful, take just 1 second to support the channel. We put a lot of time and research into making videos that keep renters informed. So drop a comment telling us what rent situation you're facing, and don't forget to hit subscribe. It's just one click, but it helps us continue bringing you valuable updates. Number 2, stricter eviction rules. Tenants must understand another major change affecting renters across Canada involves new and stricter eviction procedures. In the past, some tenants feared that landlords could remove them from a property with very little warning. Because of this concern, several provinces have started tightening the rules around how and when a landlord can legally evict a tenant. The goal is to create a more balanced system where both landlords and tenants clearly understand their rights. Under many updated housing regulations, landlords must now provide specific legal reasons before starting an eviction process. For example, eviction may only be allowed if the tenant has not paid rent, seriously violated the lease agreement, or if the landlord genuinely plans to move into the property themselves or sell it under certain conditions. These rules are designed to prevent unfair removals, but they also mean that tenants must pay close attention to official notices and legal paperwork. Housing experts say these changes are important because eviction cases have increased in many cities due to rising housing demand and higher property costs. Governments are trying to ensure that tenants are not forced out without proper legal justification. In most cases, landlords are now required to provide formal written notices, longer notice periods, and sometimes compensation, depending on the reason for eviction. However, there is an important responsibility on the tenant side as well. If you receive an eviction notice, know it's crucial to read the document carefully and respond quickly. Tenants usually have the right to challenge the eviction through a tenant board or housing tribunal if they believe it is unfair or illegal. Ignoring the notice could make the situation worse. Experts recommend always keeping copies of rent payments, communication with your landlord, and your lease agreement. These documents can become extremely valuable if a dispute happens. Understanding the eviction process may feel complicated, but knowing your rights can help protect your home, stability, and peace of mind. We spend hours researching and simplifying these housing laws so renters like you can stay informed. If this helped you, drop a comment telling us your biggest rental concern right now. And please subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it helps us continue creating videos like this. Number 3. New crackdown on renovictions. One of the most controversial issues in Canada's rental market is something known as renovictions. This happens when a landlord asks tenants to move out because the property needs major renovations. In some cases, the renovations are real and necessary, but in many situations, tenants have claimed that renovations were used as a legal excuse to remove renters, allowing landlords to raise the rent significantly for the next tenant. Because of growing complaints and housing shortages, several Canadian provinces and cities have introduced stricter rules to control renovictions. The new regulations are designed to make sure landlords cannot simply claim renovations without proof. In many areas now, landlords must provide official building permits, renovation plans, and proper legal documentation before asking tenants to leave for construction work. Another important protection being introduced in some regions is the right of first refusal. This means that after the renovation is complete, the original tenant may have the legal right to move back into the unit at the previous rent or within the rent control guideline. This rule is intended to prevent landlords from pushing tenants out just to dramatically increase the price afterward. Housing experts say this policy change is important because renovictions became a growing concern in cities where housing demand is extremely high. When rental supply is limited, losing even one affordable unit can make the housing crisis worse. By tightening the law, governments are trying to protect long-term tenants from sudden displacement. However, tenants should still stay alert. If you ever receive a renovation notice, always ask for official documentation and verify that the project is approved by the local municipality. Keep copies of all communication and contact your local tenant board or housing authority if something doesn't seem right. Understanding these rules can help renters avoid being pushed out unfairly and protect their long-term housing stability. We truly put a lot of research and effort into making videos that help renters stay informed. So tell us in the comments, have you ever faced a rent increase or renoviction situation? And don't forget to subscribe. It's just one click, but it helps us keep bringing you important updates. Number 4. New restrictions on short-term rentals. Another important change affecting the rental market in Canada is the tightening of rules around short-term rentals, like vacation stays and temporary listings. Over the past few years, platforms that allow property owners to rent units for a few days or weeks at a time have grown rapidly. While this created new income opportunities for property owners, housing experts noticed a serious side effect. Thousands of homes that could have been long-term rental apartments were instead being used for short-term guests. Because of this growing concern, several cities and provinces have introduced stricter regulations on short-term rentals. Governments argue that these changes are necessary to protect housing availability for people who actually live and work in the area. In many places now, property owners can only offer short-term rentals if the unit is their primary residence. This means investors who previously purchased multiple apartments just to rent them to tourists may no longer be able to operate in the same way. Another new rule being enforced in many cities is mandatory registration and licensing. Property owners must register their short-term rental with the local government and sometimes pay specific licensing fees. Platforms may also be required to remove listings that do not follow local housing laws. These steps are meant to bring more transparency and prevent illegal listings from reducing the supply of homes for long-term tenants. For renters, these changes could have a positive impact over time. If fewer apartments are used as temporary tourist accommodations, more units may return to the long-term rental market, which could help reduce housing shortages. However, the effects will take time, and tenants should still stay aware of how these regulations are enforced in their specific city. If you live in a building that suddenly has many short-term guests coming and going, it may be worth checking whether the property follows the new local rules. Knowing the law helps protect both tenant safety and housing availability. We spend hours researching these updates so renters like you can stay informed and protected. So tell us in the comments, is housing getting more expensive in your city right now? And please subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it helps us keep creating helpful videos like this. Number 5. Rent control exemptions for new buildings. Another major change that many renters don't realize involves rent control exemptions for newer buildings. In several Canadian provinces, rent control rules only apply to properties built before a specific date. This means that apartments constructed after that cutoff may not be protected by the same limits that older buildings follow. For many tenants moving into modern apartment complexes, this rule can come as a surprising and expensive discovery. Traditionally, rent control was designed to protect tenants from sudden and extreme rent increases. Governments would set a maximum percentage that landlords could raise rent each year. But with the rising demand for housing and a shortage of new developments, policymakers introduced exemptions for newly built properties. When the idea was to encourage developers to build more rental housing by giving them more flexibility in pricing. However, the downside is that tenants living in these newer buildings may face much larger rent increases once their lease term ends. In some situations, landlords can adjust the rent to match current market prices, which might be significantly higher than what the tenant originally agreed to pay. For renters who assume their apartment follows traditional rent control guidelines, this can create unexpected financial pressure. Housing experts often recommend that tenants carefully check the construction year of the building before signing a lease. If the building is exempt from rent control, it's important to understand that future rent increases could be higher than usual. Reading the lease agreement closely and asking questions before signing can help tenants avoid surprises later. Another smart step is researching local rental trends in your neighborhood. If prices are rising quickly in your area, living in a rent control exempt building could mean your housing costs increase faster than expected. By understanding these rules early, tenants can make more informed decisions about where to live and how to plan their finances. We truly put a lot of effort into researching and simplifying these housing updates for you. So tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a sudden rent increase? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it helps us keep making these helpful videos. Number 6, digital lease agreements, becoming the new standard. Another noticeable shift in Canada's rental market is the rapid move toward digital lease agreements. In the past, most rental contracts were signed in person using printed paperwork. Today, many landlords and property management companies are switching to online lease signing systems, where tenants review and sign agreements through email or specialized digital platforms. At first glance, this change may seem convenient. Digital leases allow both tenants and landlords to complete the entire rental process quickly, sometimes within minutes. Documents can be stored electronically, reducing paperwork and making it easier to access the lease later if questions arise. Many housing experts believe this system helps simplify the rental process, especially in large cities where apartments are rented quickly. However, the shift to digital leases also brings new challenges for tenants. When everything happens online, renters may feel pressured to sign documents quickly before someone else takes the unit. In competitive housing markets, tenants sometimes rush through the contract without carefully reading every clause. This can lead to misunderstandings about rent increases, maintenance responsibilities, or additional fees written in the agreement. Housing advisors often recommend that tenants treat a digital lease exactly the same as a traditional paper contract. Even if it's online, the agreement is still legally binding. Before signing anything, it's important to read the entire document slowly and make sure you understand every section. If something seems confusing, tenants should ask the landlord for clarification or request time to review the contract carefully. Another useful tip is to always download and save a personal copy of the signed lease. Having access to the document can be extremely helpful if any dispute occurs in the future. While digital leases are becoming the new normal in the rental market, staying informed and cautious can help tenants protect their legal rights and financial security. We spend a lot of time researching and simplifying these important updates for renters like you. So tell us in the comments, Have you ever signed a digital lease, and did you read every detail? And please subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it helps us continue making videos like this. Number 7. Stronger rules against illegal rental fees. Another important update tenants should know about involves new rules targeting illegal rental fees. In the past, many renters reported being asked to pay extra charges that were not always clearly explained or legally required. These could include application fees, move-in charges, cleaning deposits, or even administrative costs added at the last minute. Because of these complaints, several provinces and housing authorities have begun cracking down on unfair or hidden rental fees. The goal of these regulations is to make renting more transparent and predictable for tenants. In many areas, landlords are now limited in what they can legally charge beyond the monthly rent and approved deposits. For example, certain provinces strictly control security deposits and key deposits, and they may prohibit additional charges that are not clearly outlined in housing laws. If a landlord asks for unexpected payments that are not allowed, tenants may have the right to challenge or report those fees. Housing advocates say these changes are important because hidden fees can quietly increase the true cost of renting. A unit that seems affordable at first might suddenly become expensive once extra charges are added. By limiting these practices, governments hope to create a system where tenants know exactly what they are paying before signing a lease. For renters, the best protection is staying informed. Always ask the landlord to provide a full breakdown of all charges before agreeing to rent the unit. If any fee seems unusual or unclear, take time to research whether it is legally permitted in your province. Many tenant boards and housing websites provide lists of allowed and prohibited fees, making it easier to verify the rules. Another helpful tip is to request written receipts for every payment you make. This documentation can protect you if any disputes arise later. Understanding these regulations ensures tenants are not caught off guard by unexpected financial demands during the rental process. We put a lot of time and research into creating these videos to keep renters informed. So tell us in the comments, have you ever been asked to pay a strange rental fee? And please subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it helps us continue bringing you valuable updates. Number 8. Updated rules for security deposits. Another rental rule that many tenants need to understand involves security deposits. A security deposit is the money a tenant pays before moving in, usually meant to cover potential damages or unpaid rent. While this has been a standard practice for years, several provinces in Canada have introduced updated regulations to make the process clearer and fairer for tenants. One key change focuses on how much landlords are legally allowed to charge as a deposit. In many provinces, the law now clearly limits the amount to a specific portion of the rent, often equivalent to 1 month's rent or less. This rule prevents landlords from demanding large upfront payments that could make it harder for tenants to secure housing. Another important update relates to how deposits must be handled during the tenancy. In some areas, landlords are required to store the deposit properly and may even need to pay interest on it over time. These rules exist to ensure that tenants' money is protected while they live in the property. Perhaps the most important part of these regulations involves how and when the deposit must be returned. After a tenant moves out, landlords usually have a limited amount of time to inspect the property and return the deposit if there are no major damages. If deductions are made for repairs or cleaning, landlords are often required to provide written explanations and receipts showing exactly why the money was withheld. To protect yourself, experts recommend documenting the condition of the apartment before moving in and again when moving out. Taking photos or videos of the property can serve as valuable proof if disagreements arise about damages later. It's also helpful to keep copies of your lease agreement, payment records, and any communication with the landlord. Understanding these deposit rules helps ensure that tenants are treated fairly and increases the chances of getting their money back without unnecessary disputes. We spend a lot of time researching and simplifying these rental laws to help renters like you stay informed. So tell us in the comments, did you get your full security deposit back when you moved out? And please subscribe. It's just one click, but it really helps us keep making these helpful videos. Number 9. Tenant rights. When a property is sold, another situation that often causes anxiety for renters is when a landlord decides to sell the property. Many tenants worry that once a building or house is sold, they might suddenly be forced to move out. However, Canadian housing laws have introduced clearer rules to ensure that tenants still have important protections even when ownership changes. One of the most important things tenants should know is that a lease agreement usually remains valid even after the property is sold. This means that if you have a signed lease, the new owner typically must honor the same terms until the lease period ends. In simple terms, the sale of the property does not automatically cancel your agreement. This rule helps provide stability for tenants who might otherwise feel uncertain about their housing situation. However, there are certain situations where the new owner may request that the tenant move out. For example, if the buyer plans to live in the property themselves, they may be allowed to issue a formal notice asking the tenant to vacate. Even in these cases, the law usually requires proper notice periods and sometimes financial compensation, depending on the province and the circumstances. Housing experts often advise tenants to stay calm and informed if they hear that their building is being sold. The first step is to review your lease agreement carefully and understand its terms. If you receive any notice related to the sale or potential eviction, I'd always check whether it follows local housing regulations and required notice timelines. Another useful step is keeping records of all communication with both the current landlord and the new property owner. Documentation can be very helpful if questions or disputes arise later. By understanding these protections, tenants can feel more confident knowing that a property sale does not automatically mean losing their home overnight. We put a lot of effort into researching and explaining these important renter updates. So tell us in the comments, has your rental building ever been sold while you were living there? And please subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it helps us continue making these videos for you. Number 10. Government crackdown on illegal rental units. The final change that many tenants should be aware of is the increasing government crackdown on illegal rental units. Across several Canadian cities, authorities have begun enforcing stricter housing regulations to ensure that rental properties meet safety standards, zoning rules, and building codes. While these actions are intended to improve living conditions, they can sometimes create unexpected challenges for tenants. Illegal rental units often include unregistered basement apartments, converted garages, or properties that were never officially approved for residential use. In many cases, tenants move into these units because they are cheaper and easier to find in expensive housing markets. However, if the city later discovers that the unit violates building or zoning laws, the landlord may be forced to shut down the rental or make major changes to the property. For tenants, this situation can be stressful because it might mean having to move out with limited notice, even if they have been paying rent regularly. Governments say the purpose of these inspections is to protect renters from unsafe living conditions, such as poor ventilation, fire hazards, or inadequate emergency exits. While safety is extremely important, the sudden closure of illegal units can also reduce the number of affordable homes available in already competitive housing markets. To protect yourself, housing experts recommend doing a little research before renting a unit. Try to confirm whether the apartment is properly registered and legally approved for rental use in your city. If possible, and ask the landlord for documentation showing that the property meets local housing and safety regulations. It's also wise to check that the unit has working smoke detectors, safe exits, and proper ventilation, which are common requirements in legal rental properties. By taking these precautions, tenants can avoid the risks associated with illegal housing and ensure they are living in a safe and legally recognized rental unit. We put a lot of time and research into making these videos to keep renters informed and protected. So tell us in the comments, do you think your city has enough safe and affordable rental housing? And please subscribe. It's just one click, but it helps us continue bringing you important updates. As Canada's housing market continues to evolve, it's becoming more important than ever for renters to stay informed about the rules that directly affect their homes and finances. The changes we discussed today, from rent increase limits and eviction protections to renoviction rules and short-term rental restrictions, are shaping the future of renting across the country. While some of these laws are designed to protect tenants and improve housing fairness, others may introduce new challenges that renters need to be prepared for. One of the biggest lessons here is that knowledge is power when it comes to renting. Many tenants only start researching their rights after a problem appears, such as a sudden rent increase or an eviction notice. But by understanding these 10 important rental law changes ahead of time, on why you can make smarter decisions, ask the right questions, and avoid being caught off guard. It's also important to remember that housing laws can vary from province to province, and sometimes even from city to city. That's why staying updated with reliable information is essential. Whether you're signing a new lease, dealing with a rent increase, or hearing that your building might be sold, knowing your legal rights as a tenant can help protect both your home and your financial stability. At the same time, the housing conversation in Canada is far from over. Governments, housing experts, and communities are still debating how to balance tenant protections with the need to build more housing supply. The policies we see today may continue to evolve in the coming years. So if you're currently renting or planning to rent in the future, staying informed about these changes can help you navigate the rental market with confidence and avoid costly surprises. Understanding these laws isn't just helpful. For many tenants, it can be the difference between housing security and unexpected hardship.